Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals, Grant and Brad Townsend. We had the Super Bowl on Sunday, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Debbie made her famous chicken wings. They were spectacular.
Wait, there was a game?
Yeah, it was kind of a game.
And
here's the thing. I don't want anybody complaining about the CFP and say, oh, see how imbalanced all this is. It's a blowout, and that's why this is not good. We have to do something else. Well, the last two Super Bowls have been decided by 16 and 18 points, right? So I don't want to hear about that anymore because we're not adjusting the playoffs in the NFL. So sometimes that just happens.
I'll just say this, and then I want to get to Brad because we're building this podcast around Brad.
Bad Brad.
Bunny or bad Brad, bad Bunny.
I like that. I like Bad Brad. That's good.
Bad Brad. I will just say this. I want to give Jason Garrett some props here because he picked Seattle by 17 points, 34-17 on the pregame show on NBC. And I was like, what? Everybody else was within 5-7 points. And he predicted a 17-point win, which is, I mean, when we consider Jason Garrett's personality, that's way out of the norms for him. But props to him.
Yeah, you must have missed Tim Calishaw on our very own newspaper and online predicting a 29-14 score.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I didn't.
And he went 12-1 against the spread during the playoffs. I mean,
hey, can listen? We've heard all of Tim's breakdowns.
I mean, I'm just stating it ain't bragging if you're just stating facts. But
well, that's true. That's good.
Yeah.
29-14. Wow. All right. Props to Tim. All right, we're going to get back to the Super Bowl in a minute here, but we need to jump right in this stuff here because we're on a tight schedule. There's a lot of things. I'm not on a tight schedule, but everybody else is. So at any rate.
That's the usual case, Kevin.
That's the usual case. I got nothing going on. Brad, since the last time we talked to you and since the last time we made this podcast, the Mavericks kind of made a big trade. And, there's been a lot of different reactions to it. And I think in one case, my problem with the reaction is that people are saying, oh, look, this is all they got for Luka was a first-round pick, Max Christie. Well, 3 first-round picks, Max Christie, and 3 second-round picks. And that's all they got. You can't look at it that way. I mean, The water's under the bridge, right?
Right. So, well, yeah. In that vacuum you mentioned, if you just with what they got back for Luka Doncic, it's infinitesimal, right? But in terms of the Anthony Davis trade, I give that trade a B+, given what they gave up, what they got back. I did speak to one NBA person who I trust, said he thought that the Mavericks actually turned down a better situation. He said that actually Atlanta offered 4 second-round picks for Gafford, and that the Mavericks were holding firm on wanting a first-round pick. So I get that. Maybe our second-round pick's that valuable. Well, I don't know. Teams are stockpiling them for sure to use for trades. But then the other aspect of that was that Toronto actually offered a more attractive package in terms of picks, including 1 or 2 first-round picks. But the problem there is that Toronto would have wanted Dallas to take back Jakob Poeltl. He's averaging 9 and 8. The Raptors recently signed him to a 3-year extension that doesn't even kick in until 27-28. Averaging $28 million a year. The Mavericks certainly don't want to take back that kind of money. So I disagree with this NBA guy who says, well, the Mavericks would have been better off going with that route. I think they could still trade Gafford, in the offseason. So that's still out there. But listen, there was a psychological deal and there was a financial situation. Anthony Davis was constantly going to live under the shadow of I'm not Luka Doncic. And the Mavericks and the Mavericks management was always going to have that shadow as well. So they freed up a lot of money. Now it's incumbent on them to build around Cooper Flag, which is actually, if you look at the bigger picture, that's great for the Mavericks. I think building around Cooper Flag is going to be a lot easier than building around Luka Doncic was.
And look, I'm just going to say,
I want to say, Evan wants to say something here because he's been making this point now for 2 weeks. So Evan, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, Brad. I'd give him a B just for completing the trade, because I thought that getting rid of Anthony Davis at this point in time and making the messaging clear that, hey, we're building around Cooper Flag, was a necessity for where this team had been. And to your psychological point, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that they got some usable pieces going forward, and add all of that onto it. I'd almost push them up to an A. Not that I have any evaluation skills of NBA players. I just think they like you said, they stockpiled some draft picks, and they got, and for me, the most important part was closing this chapter. I just look at what the messaging has been publicly since that deal got done, and I think what was kind of stated as, not overtly stated, but we all knew what was coming, right? When they got Cooper Flag, this team was going to build around Cooper Flag, but now that's unfettered. There's none of that noise in the air in the airwaves. It's all Cooper Flag, and it's like a new era for the Mavs.
I don't, and I know what Evan is saying. But I was willing to wait, until after the season for them to do a deal if they thought that was going to be best, if they thought it was going to be best for the new GM, all those situations. There's, the rest of this season is over. I mean, they weren't going to the playoffs. It wasn't like Anthony Davis was going to come back and now now that's it. Look, see, this is what they can be, and we can go into next year and that there's really something to build on now because he's gotten back and this is happening. None of that was going to happen. Anthony Davis was going to disappear. But I was frankly shocked at the deal, right? Brad and you and I were discussing it with text messages about, how well, what's the best thing to do here. And the salary dump to me obviously is huge. And that's for me, that's the biggest part of the trade, is that now you freed up $70 million going into next year. And because I don't see any of those guys coming back, right? The expiring contracts on the players. They've got everybody except for Tyus Jones. He's the only one who's under contract for next season.
Right. I mean, maybe AJ Johnson would be a guy that they keep going forward, but
I'm sorry. AJ Thompson is also under contract, isn't that? That's right. Yeah. But the others probably not. So, and the whole thing about second round draft picks is just for draft capital, right? That's why you have them. That's why people stockpile them, is trying to make a trade. And so Daniel Gafford, as you pointed out, and thanks for that reporting on that. It's interesting to know. I wouldn't have done either one of those trades either. Well, I might trade Daniel Gafford for you. I don't have to have a first round draft pick for him, depending on what the first rounder is. But the Toronto thing, no, you wouldn't want to bring back any salary in that. That's what makes this work for me, is that they can do that.
Yeah, I think that actually would have been a public. That might have been the better basketball thing in the bigger picture, but that would have been a public relations disaster, because then you're just basically subbing out Pirtle for, in the public's mind, Pirtle for Anthony Davis, and Pirtle is almost in street clothes almost as much as Davis.
Yeah, we can't have that.
Nice, I mean, again, to the Cooper Flag stuff, right? It's draft capital and the salary cap clearance room that they've made. So yeah, it just creates a much more clear path at this point.
A real quick note before we get to the GM talk. So Cooper Flag's mom, Kelly, tweeted something the other day about being mad about why can't we just let Cooper be Cooper and quit comparing him to people. Was she talking about the Kendrick Perkins comment that he was the white LeBron James?
It's unclear. That would be my guess. And I don't have a problem with her. I like the fact that that's what moms do. If my mom had been on Twitter while she was still alive, she probably would have, tweeted back at some fans for getting on my case about things. But the thing that was ironic to me is
I would want
Yeah, the thing that was ironic to me is that her tweet came out on the same day where we learned that Dirk had sat down with Cooper, and people are going to be making that comparison, just not necessarily like what they each bring to the table as a player, but being the face of the franchise. And I think most people, and Cooper was very welcoming. I thought it was a great talk. It wasn't necessarily an interview, but it was a great talk between the Mavericks' greatest icon and the
Heir
second
apparent.
removed heir apparent after Luka. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
But I
All
think
right.
there's actual use, right, to Dirk sitting down with him and talking about like what goes along
absolutely.
with being the face of the franchise. And Kevin and I have been through this on baseball players and some other guys. I do have a problem with a guy 40 games in his career being compared to, comp to one of. I understand where the mother is coming from, 100%.
Sure.
Because it's just not fair to comp an 18 or 19-year-old kid to one of the two greatest basketball players in history. And that is something that we do. We glom on to these comparisons to set the stage so high, and then invariably, somebody's going to call that back and say, well, if he doesn't end up in the conversation as the greatest player of all time, then he was a failure, and that's not the case here, clearly.
Well, but it's also it's kind of a nice thing, right? Being compared to people. It's
There's
not
a
like
compliment. There's a compliment aspect to that for sure, 100%.
you're not. He's not calling him a bum. Holy cow! I will have to say, and I'm making that comment about Cooper's mom because she has kind of a colorful history with her social media posts. So it'll bear watching as we go forward. All right, so Brad, tell us who made this deal, because right now the Mavericks have co-GMs, Matt Riccardi and Michael Finley, and so both of these guys could have been on the phone with Will Dawkins in Washington. So tell us who was it that made this deal?
Well, in terms of the Washington trade, I've been told that was Riccardi was doing all the talking with Washington, but I specifically asked Riccardi and Michael Finley during the media gathering the other night, how did y'all divide this? I mean, and Finley said rock, paper, scissors. And but Riccardi made the point that one guy can't be contacting 30 different teams. And so there was a natural division from that standpoint. So I can't specifically say like Michael Finley took exactly 15 teams and Riccardi took 15 or which ones those were. But in terms of the Washington deal, it was Riccardi. And listen, I think it's natural. Fans were already on social media comparing the two. They're sitting side by side on the days, answering questions from media, and fans were already kind of making the comparison. Well, which did a better job as a public spokesperson? And I would give the edge to Riccardi there. I thought his answers were a little more expansive, a little more thoughtful. Michael, I've known Michael for a long time. I actually covered Michael when he was a Maverick here. His answers were shorter, and he was being more coy. But listen, that's not the number one reason you have a general manager. But it is important. It is important because I think that's an area where Nico Harrison failed, is being a public spokesperson.
Absolutely. As the face of the franchise there, because first of all, you always had Mark over your shoulder, and that was always going to be the issue for any GM. And maybe there was part of Nico, or at least I thought there was a part of Nico. It's just like with Jason Garrett with the Cowboys, and Jason never said anything to the media. And I always felt like he thought, Jerry's saying enough. I don't need to be talking any more than this. And that maybe, I thought early on that Nico just thought that. Well, clearly that was just Nico's nature, though. He didn't matter who the owner was or what he was saying. He wasn't going to say anything. So that's a great point.
Well, and that's fine. In fact, during the finals run, you didn't hear from Nico, and that actually plays well. But things are going well. He's not sticking out his chest, taking credit for it, right? Right. However, when things go sideways and you're the guy who makes the most controversial trade in NBA history, and Coach Jason Kidd and the players are continually left answering questions game after game where the home fans are booing and fire Nico, and those guys are left holding the bag, so to speak. That was not good.
The way Doug
We-
Melvin once explained this to me, Brad, this exact concept, and you're 100% spot on, was, and Doug will be promo time. Doug will be the guest on the Rangers podcast this week. But as a GM, he thought his responsibility was, when there is something good that happens, find everybody that's possible that you can give credit to.
Mhm.
And when something bad happens, make sure that you are available and accountable. And that's the responsibility of the GM with the media. It's very simple. And I think is if people understand that going into the job, uh, they're treated very, very fairly. It's when when you either glom for or grab credit or shirk blame, which we had the GM that followed Doug Melvin into Texas in a lot of ways did that. You have problems. And that's exactly what I saw take place with Nico. On top of the idiotic trade, he, made it an untenable situation just by the way he handled everything after that.
All right, so let's talk about the situation with the GMs. Matt McCarty made this deal. I thought it was a great deal for what they could, for the circumstances they were under. I thought it was great. That's the only way you can judge that. You can't judge it by the Lucas stuff. That's all water under the bridge. This is what you have to do. If you're trying to make it into a steal now, you were never going to get anything for him. Never. People are just not that stupid.
Luke is done.
AD.
That's done. It's time to move on from that. That was the whole idea.
Absolutely. So going forward, Brad, when the season is over, they can't go on with co-GMs. It's a nice concept. It's all buddy, make a nice, TV show. But that's not going to work. So does Matt Riccardi get the deal or get the job, or do they open it up outside? And if they were to do that, who would be a good candidate for the job?
I would say if they stay internal, I would say that Riccardi has the edge. They both have a good relationship with Jason Kidd, which is important because I'm not sure that Jason Kidd and Nico, while they started out as a pair, I don't think that they finished that way. I think they were at odds on some personnel decisions. But I do, if you take Patrick Dumont's history, very short history with the Mavericks, I've been told he is turning over every rock. He's considering every possibility. And so if he can make a big splash higher, he will. And I think I haven't reported this, but I'm putting two and two together. I think the Golden State situation bears watching for the rest of the year. Steve Kerr is on the last year of his contract. The Warriors were very public in saying, here's why we haven't extended Kerr. He was on board with that. The Warriors did nothing of consequence on the trade deadline except getting rid of Kuminga. Taking back, Porzingis is not going to get Golden State to the next level. And the bottom line is Steve Kerr and Rick Welts worked together in Phoenix. I mean, this goes way, way back. And then, of course, they worked together again at Golden State. And so that is a name to watch for. I really believe that.
I have one question on that.
Well, go ahead. Hurry up.
For both of you guys. We all know that Steve Kerr is very outspoken, particularly on political and socioeconomic issues. How would that play in Texas?
I'm just going to say that, yes, and I thought about that.
Well, how has Greg Popovich played in Texas?
That was a great point, right? I mean, when you win, most people love you, right?
Right.
So I mean that's probably the retort I was looking for.
Well, let's look at this. Let's look at it from the standpoint of Rick Welts is the first openly gay man to be an executive in the NBA, right? And so this is a conservative state. That doesn't seem to bother anybody, and it shouldn't bother anybody. And it shouldn't bother anybody about Steve Kerr's views on guns and other things he's talked about openly. So I think if you could get Steve Kerr, that is a home run hire if he were to be available. And that was one of the views we had when Patrick Dumont hired Rick Welts, right, Brad?
Mhm. Right. He could build.
You went out
Right.
and
He's
got,
good. He's going to build a great arena like Chase Center, uh,
yeah,
not with some similarities. And he's been adding. He's been building a staff, a business staff here, and he's got relationships everywhere in the NBA.
yeah. I think that I think it'd be a great hire. I'd be all for Steve Kerr. Now, I wrote the other day to whoever made this trade should be getting the job full time. I think that Matt Riccardi has earned that possibility. But if you could get Steve Kerr to come, then I think that's a home run hire. Now, the question is how long Rick Welts, does he want to hang around? If he hangs around for another couple of years, I think that's certainly enough time for Steve Kerr to establish himself in this role. And he doesn't need to be babysat after that. So that all bears watching as well. A lot of good things happening on the Mavericks front. I think that's, and we're not being homers when we say that. I just think that there are, there is reason to feel like there's a future for the Mavs, starting with Cooper Flagg, starting with the fact that they made a good deal to get themselves out from under Anthony Davis's contract and give themselves a chance to rebuild this roster around Cooper, and not a long-term rebuild either. I don't see this as something that's going to take forever to do. I think that in a couple of years they can be very competitive. But Brad, I'll leave that to you for the last word on the Mavericks.
Yeah, I would just in general say it's there's a much needed breath of fresh air blowing through the organization. We'll
Yeah,
leave it at that. Hope and excitement are the two biggest elements. Don Nelson always said this. Hope and excitement are the two biggest things that you can bring to your fandom, and the Mavericks have that.
yeah, they do. They do have that. All right, before Brad gets out, because Brad's got big things to do. Uh, so the Super Bowl was, we teased that at the very top, was bad. I mean, you can talk about great defense all you want to, and certainly Seattle has a great defense. By the way, one of the defensive ends for Seattle, he didn't have a big game. DeMarcus Lawrence, he had a quarterback hit and a couple of tackles, but he still makes a presence. I watched him a lot during that game, just to see how he would do. For his age, he's just such a physical specimen. Boy, he just still gets around. He's always running to the ball. Doesn't matter where it is on the field. If the play is in front of him, behind him, wherever, he's always moving, always running. We've talked ad infinitum about the Micah Parsons trade and what a disaster that was to lose your pass rush. And I have to say, we said very little at the time when DeMarcus Lawrence left to go to Seattle, and that was, in my estimation, not as big a disaster as Micah Parsons, because Micah's on the track to be a Hall of Famer. But DeMarcus Lawrence is a really good player. He made the Pro Bowl this year for the 5th time. He's not a great pass rusher. He's a good pass rusher, but everything else he does is very good. He was ranked by Pro Football Focus the 11th best defensive end in the league. That was ahead of Trey Hendrickson and also ahead of Max Crosby, two guys that everybody talks about. Well, what if the Cowboys went and got them? They had a defensive end in that mold, and they let him walk. So it wasn't just that they let Micah Parsons go or trade him. They let DeMarcus Lawrence walk. Got nothing in return for him. So one more bad thing about the Cowboys.
Yeah, he's just a winning player, right? I mean, and that was the unfortunate part. Micah's a winning player too, and they just were saddled on teams that weren't capable of winning. The game was bad. I said, like with 11 minutes left, I said, this is a bad game. And Gina said, why do you think it's a bad game? And I said, well, even when it was a 9-point game early on in the first half, you just never got even when it was a 6-point game, you never got the impression that New England had any ability to compete offensively with Seattle. I mean, that Seattle defense was just so good. And if it's going to be a great defensive struggle outside of Christian Gonzalez's plays, I mean, you both teams really got to step up and make great defensive plays. And by the third quarter, Seattle was really kind of controlling the whole game.
Yeah, no question about it. So, Brad, did you watch the game?
Of course, I was reminded I think we were spoiled by recent Super Bowls, because if you look at the early Super Bowls, they were pretty good. But then we had like a 20-year, 20, even 25-year stretch of really pretty mediocre Super Bowls, one-sided. And that's kind of what we've gotten back to the last couple of years. So it's kind of humorous for me to hear fans go, "Oh, these Super Bowls are terrible." Well, most of the 60 Super Bowls have actually been one-sided. I Here's where we've come to in Dallas Fort Worth with the Cowboys being out of the last 30 Super Bowls is I watch kind of for local players. For a couple of years there, it was pseudo Dallasite Patrick Mahomes. And in this Super Bowl, it was Jackson Smith Najigba and Christian Gonzalez. But the guy that jumped out to me was Byron Murphy of DeSoto.
Yeah, he had a great game for the Seahawks and defensive tackle. I remember when he came out, he was kind of quietly really good at Texas. He was, Texas had a better defensive line back then, and that's when they had Devondre Sweat too, right? Both of those guys at the same time. Like, which was the better one? And all the scouts, and I thought I just kind of signed off on the Devondre Sweat. He's just such a great, copy. Just this huge guy, and he was funny, and it was all great. Then everybody said, well, really, actually, Byron Murphy's a better defensive tackle of the two. And Sweat's been pretty good too, but Murphy's become part of a great rebuild there. Here's another shot at Jerry Jones, because we talked about this somewhat before the Super Bowl, and the fact that both the Seahawks and the Patriots were teams that had been to the Super Bowl, right, in 2013, and then complete makeovers and come back again. And we're still waiting on the Cowboys.
Well, been there, done that, repeated, rinsed, washed, and yeah.
And John Snyder has done it there's not a single player left from that last Super Bowl. Not the coach, not the players, nobody. He's done it all with a different crew. When you can go to the Super Bowls with different quarterbacks, much less different head coaches, that really shows who you are as a GM, in my mind. I mean, anybody can stumble onto a great quarterback like Tom Brady or a great coach like Bill Belichick, but when you're doing it with different head coaches and different quarterbacks, that really shows the extent of what you're capable of doing. All right, we're going to let Brad walk now. He's got things to do and mess with a couple of numb nuts like me and Evan. But we appreciate you coming on, Brad. It's some good stuff, as always, and we'll have you back to talk more about where the Mavericks are headed, maybe if we get an idea of what they're going to do at this GM position.
Well, thanks for wrapping me into this.
Sure. It's always good to have Bad Brad.
Bad Brad, I like it.
Let's not let that grow wings, okay?
No, I figured that's what Sydney called you.
Well, yeah, on some days.
All right, there goes Brad. We're going to talk about the Rangers now. That's where Evan is, out in Surprise.
Hold on. We never talked about the halftime show.
We never talked about the halftime show?
No.
Oh, Bad Bunny? You want to talk about that?
Let's talk a couple minutes about the halftime show.
Yeah, look, this is going to get me in trouble. I love the halftime show. I couldn't understand a word he's saying, obviously, but yeah, I thought it was cute. I thought it was fun. I thought it was, I'm sure it didn't look that great from when you're in the stadium, because it was, what made it good was all the close-ups of things and people having a good time and all the rest of that stuff. But I thought it was good.
Listen, let me just say, my genre on Spotify is dad rock, okay? I mean, I have bad musical taste based on what the kids say and what everybody else says. So I always look at the Super Bowl halftime show knowing that probably the artist is not going to be my genre. So I'm just looking at, is it a good beat that I like? Is it something that's fun? And is the production good? And I'm going to tell you, first of all, the production on this was maybe the best I've ever seen of a Super Bowl for me, because the visual aspect of really portraying, Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican pride really came through. From the sugarcane fields to the bodegas to even the way the little casita was built, all of that. And the power lines are a very important symbol in Puerto Rico as well. The music was all great. I didn't understand a word of it, but, The great thing to me too was like the next morning when you start to find all the Easter eggs that are in this whole Super Bowl halftime show, that Ronald Acuna Jr. was on the stage, that Cardi B was there, that Pedro Pascal was there, that the first,
JJ Barea was got a shout out.
yeah, I mean that the first thing Bad Bunny said was, actually, if I'm at the Super Bowl, I made it because I never gave up on myself, and you shouldn't give up on yourself too. You're worth more than you think. That's as uplifting a message as I think I've ever heard at a Super Bowl, right? Um, I thought it was, without getting political, I mean, I just thought it was a fine halftime show. It wasn't something that it wasn't something that I, watch or listen to regularly, but I enjoyed it for the
Look,
spectacle.
look, here's the thing. People are upset that I've seen. People are upset that it was all in Spanish, so they couldn't understand it. I thought that was disrespectful. Then I saw that people said, and he's flying a flag of another country. Puerto Rico is a territory of the U.S. So it's like,
Along those lines, I will say that I saw, Kevin, you're spending too much time on Twitter these days following Cooper Flag's mom, but somehow on my timeline, I did see a tweet from John Rocker, which should have made me avert my eyes. And he talked about foreigner speaking in a foreign language. And I actually had to respond to that. And I said, look, you dolt. And I used the word dolt. Maybe you don't remember this, but Puerto Rico is an American territory, and you should, since you went to winter ball to play there when you needed a second chance ahead of your time with the Rangers. So, these hot takes, it'd be great if these hot takes were based in fact. That's the thing for me. And just too many people worked up over the halftime show. It took on a life, and we're talking about this as much as the game, but it just took on a life that was all its own.
well, here's my response to not being able to understand the words. When I was in high school, my favorite artist was Elton John, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying in the songs. I loved it anyway. So anyway,
With my hearing, I can't understand a word ever, and so yeah, it's all just noise to me.
and our producer Christian Vasquez points out that he also gave a shout out to Luca at the halftime performance, which I guess it would have been a good idea if they'd done subtitles, right? And maybe I could have done that, and then we could have had it in English, and maybe that would have been really cool.
No, we
too.
had the caption. We had closed captioning on because, again, the hearing impaired. But the lyrics were all in Spanish.
Still in Spanish. Well, it would have been nice. But look, I don't know anything about what's going on now in music. We watched the Grammys the Grammys the other night, and it's like he won everything, and everything I've ever seen or heard about him, and people can talk about him all I want. He's a nice guy, and he's a guy interested. He's a guy who loves where he comes from, and that's all anybody can ask. You have to love where you come from.
And I just want to say this and move on from this. It's not like if you chose that you prefer to watch Kid Rock, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't think that this determines where you are. This should determine where you are on the political spectrum. But
Yeah.
enough about politics. Let's get to some good news. The Rangers.
Is that good news?
So when I was checking in at the airport on Monday morning, the guy at the ticket counter actually recognized me. He said, "I bet you're going to Phoenix." I was checking my bags. He said, "I bet you're going to Phoenix." I said, "Yeah," and he said, "You're going to spring training, right?" Blah blah blah. He said, "You got to know your passengers," and then he said, "Are they going to be good this year?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. There's a lot of questions." But he said something that stuck with me. He said, because I haven't sensed from readers that there's a ton of enthusiasm going into the season. And he said, when they're hard to watch, it's easy to lose enthusiasm. And that really stuck with me because this was a hard team to watch last year, despite the fact that Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi were masters on the mound, and Jack Leiter did a lot of really great things. This offense was just hard to watch because it was so repetitive in a bad way. And so I think, if this offense can come out early in the year and just demonstrate that they're different in their approach, I think they can win back fans very quickly. Fans are looking for something to be enthusiastic about.
It's a little bit of the same thing we just talked about with the Super Bowl. You can talk about defense, and that's a great Seattle defense, but people like points. And it doesn't have to be 48-45, but it needs to be a game where every once in a while you see a spectacular play. And defense in baseball to me is different from defense in football. In defense in football, you're trying to smother somebody. Defense in baseball is spectacular plays, and the Rangers are capable of that. They probably won't be as good defensively as they were last year because they lost two guys in second base and right field who were very good at Gold Glove caliber players. The guys they replaced them with are not going to win Gold Glove.
I don't know.
So
I think Josh Smith has a chance to be a really above average fielder at second base.
I think he has a chance to be above average. I don't think he has a chance to be Marcus Semien. I think Marcus Semien is still at his age a terrific second baseman. Great range and also a great arm. Just the total package as a defensive player. But having said all that, what we want to talk about today before we have to get out of here, because Evan's got to go. He's got to go.
First workout this morning.
Can't miss that. Is the pitching staff. So obviously we know that if everybody's healthy, that Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi and Jack Leiter are going to be 1, 2, and 3. Is that
Mackenzie Gore?
Is 1, 2? Would Eovaldi be number 2 and deGrom still be number 1?
Hang on, Kevin. You missed Mackenzie Gore in all of this.
Oh, Mackenzie Gore. I forgot about him. You're right.
So
well, let me start with the first two.
I think going into the season, you would have deGrom number 1 and Eovaldi number 2. I think if they get to a situation where Kumar Rocker is the 5 starter, it makes it all that much more logical to have Eovaldi 2 and then Rocker 5, because I think in that situation you're going to want to have Jacob Latz pitch likely behind both those guys, and so that gives the most separation between the two.
Okay, all right. So after those 4, then we're talking about the 5th starter here, the candidates for that. And so go over the candidates.
The candidates for the 5th starter job are it's 2 guys. It's Kumar Rocker and Jacob Latz. And I think Jacob Latz goes to camp with a little bit of a head start, a lot of a head start in terms of performance. But I think if the Rangers truly are looking for the best team, they would like for Kumar to demonstrate that he's ready to be in the major league starting rotation. Because if he is, then you can slide Latz into the bullpen in a very high leverage role, whether that's pitching multiple innings early in the year and then the last inning later in the year, or whether it's pitching just high leverage from the outset. Jacob Latz is going to have an important role on this team, whether it's as a member of the rotation or as a member of the bullpen. Kumar has to win the starter's job or he's going to open the season again in AAA. So I think that there are 2 pitchers on my list of my column for Tuesday morning was about 5 pitchers who have the most opportunity to gain in spring training. And those are 2 guys on the list. But I think for Kumar, it's kind of an all or nothing thing, where for Jake Latz, he would prefer to be a starter and he wants to be a starter. But I think there's still going to be a very important role for him one way or another.
All right, this is an interesting thing to me because watching Latz talk last year, and I remember asking him this question after one of his starts, which was very good. And I didn't ask it in the way that he answered it, but I loved his answer. And I said, well, what did you think when Bruce Bochy told you whatever it was he told him? And he said, well, it was a Hall of Fame coach or manager telling me this. It was the greatest thing ever, which I thought that was such a great answer. And it was my point about Bruce Bochy all along and what he means even to young guys. But that's the thing about Jake Latz. He's not that young. He's 29, right?
Well, I mean, he along those lines, he also had a conversation with Chris Young on the bench that I noticed. I forget exactly when it was during the year. But almost immediately after that, his performance picked up. And I had thought that at that conversation, Young was saying we may need to send you back down. I thought it was almost like a, hey, we're gonna send you back down for a while. And I asked Jake about it, after he had pitched well for a week or 10 days, and he said, no, it was more of a pep talk, and he told me how much he believed in me and that if I was aggressive, how effective I could really be. And that meant a lot to me. So, I mean, I think both those conversations kind of dovetail. And I think the other part of that is it's pretty clear that Jacob Latz listens, right? He hears what people are saying. And I think that's important. So uh, he wants to be a starter. He can be a starter. The last guy that I saw that had this much desire to make the conversion from reliever to starter was another left-hander in C.J. Wilson, and he put together 3 very good years, or 2 very good years for the Rangers in that rotation.
Yeah, listen. The Rangers can hope and wish all they want to. I just don't see Kumar Rocker. Just because Jack Leiter put it together last year doesn't mean that Kumar Rocker is going to do it this year. There have been issues with Kumar, things like, covering a base and not paying attention to the runners and the fact that he doesn't have confidence in his pitches and he's constantly shaking people off. And, there's just a lot of things going on with him that he has to straighten out. I believe now, and I didn't think this before, I believe now that ultimately the hope for him should be as a back end of the bullpen guy, because he should be good at that, and it doesn't require him to have command of several pitches. He just needs 2. So I think that that's probably the best plan going forward, because just what we talked about here, the value of Jake Latz too, obviously, is to come in to help relieve these guys, because he's been very reliable. But you're also going to need some innings from that 5th starter, in my estimation, just because of the fact that Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi will probably be on pitch limits here. So somebody in that rotation is going to have to give them a lot of innings. I think that Mackenzie Gore will do that. That's his history. And I think Jack Leiter can do that. But you're going to need a third guy that's going to give them some innings as well.
Well, but that's the chief concern on Latz.
Well, yeah. I get it, because he hasn't done that, and he hasn't piled up a lot of innings before either. I just think that I'm more confident in him now. Well, look, anybody should be more confident in him than
right. He had a great year last year.
Yeah, he had a great year in Kumar. So I do think that I don't think that my prediction is that Kumar Rocker is not going to start the season.
I think you just I think you just laid out the case for what Kumar needs to show and not show during spring training. I think he needs to show confidence in something off speed and hopefully something down, because I think the biggest problem is that both his pitches stay in the same plane pretty much, and so batters aren't having to really adjust their eyes. You've got to have something you can throw down in the zone a little bit more. And so that's where a changeup or something off speed would really come into play. Now, I will say on the 2 bad fielding miscues that he had in that game against Tampa Bay really stuck out, led to a demotion, which he was called back from for briefly afterwards, and showed some progress on the fielding stuff. And I think the Rangers feel like he really listened on the fielding stuff and took that to heart. But, and I mentioned this point, the last thing he can afford to do is go out there and make a mistake in the field this spring, because if that happens, it's just going to raise that specter of what he did last year. So, yeah, there's pressure on Kumar. And I get your point about the back end of the bullpen. Let's just be clear on 2 things. The Rangers didn't draft him to be a back end of the bullpen guy. You don't use the 3rd pick in the draft on a back end of the bullpen guy. So they're gonna give him some runway to try and be a starter. But the second part of that is, if by some chance they were to say that Kumar Rocker this year needs to go to the bullpen, I don't see a situation. I'm going to ask about this, but I don't see a realistic situation where that would happen at the start of the year. I think that would happen mid-season somewhere, or at the minor league level. So for me, it's either he's in the rotation or he's in Round Rock.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying that, look, we've seen plenty of first-round picks, and the Rangers have had plenty of them who never did anything. So if you got to salvage a guy, and the best thing to do, if he ends up being a closer and a really good closer, I don't have a problem with it, because as we know, that was all funky the way he got drafted anyway, right?
Sure.
They did some not shenanigans, but they just did some things there where they were giving the real money to somebody they drafted later.
Well, I mean, they gave him below slot, and he was going to get below slot to go that high, but he was also probably not going to get that if he had continued to slide in the draft anyway. I will just say this, and then I'm going to wrap up with the three other guys that I think have something to gain. Kamar, the Rangers' choice was between Kamar and Elijah Green, and if you go look at Elijah Green, um, the Rangers ultimately did not want him. Chris Young did not want him because of the strikeout situation. Go look at Elijah Green's stats. He's been a huge bust to this point in time. He was right on with where he evaluated Elijah Green. I just want to mention the three other guys in the pitching staff that I think have real opportunities to make gains here. One is Carter Baumler, the reliever that they traded for, who was a Rule 5 pick. He's got velocity that took about a 4-mile-an-hour jump last year to 95. He's got a chance to win a spot in the bullpen, and since you'd have to offer him back to Baltimore if he doesn't make the club, I think he's got the inside track on a job. Two other guys, Mark Church and Gavin Collier, both 24-year-old right-handers from the Atlanta area, both 2019 draft picks, and both guys with upper echelon fastball velocity. They're both in the 95 to 99 mile an hour range. And if they can show that they can attack the strike zone and consistently get ahead of hitters, they really have an opportunity to create a spot for themselves in the bullpen. Because if there is one thing this bullpen is missing, it is a high octane arm to speed hitters bats up.
Yeah, no question about that. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. We appreciate you coming in. We'll be back next week, and we'll talk some more. We may even do a Rangers roundtable next week with our old pal, Sean McFarland. I shouldn't say old pal, our young pal, Sean McFarland. Yeah. He'll be out there at spring training with Evan next week. So,
Kevin, I got all your supplies here for when you come out. It's all good. Don't worry.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll be out there on March the 5th. Actually, I'm going back. Evan's going to come back here, and then he's going to go back, and he's going to take me out because I had to have an escort when I go.
I'm your senior companion. Yeah,
you're my senior companion. That's correct. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.